We exist to serve Hashem. Hashem's Torah is the ultimate and eternal source of meaning. Community is a force multiplier for living and spreading Torah. Relationships are the bricks with which community is built. During the course of this past year, the requirements of the pandemic have meant that our relationships have changed, that we've not been able to gather together as we would want in this sanctuary and in so many other places that matter. In this regard, the challenge of this past year is even more complex in that we are well aware that religious leaders of all types have not done all that they could to ensure the safety and the well-being of their communities and those beyond their communities. In this regard, Judaism especially faces a challenge as we look to the news and see just how devastating this pandemic has been to us. We are well aware of the principles of our faith when it comes to pikuach nefesh, and we should be very proud of the many examples of resilience that our community has shown during the course of this past year in applying the principles of halacha as they should be, integrating the values of pikuach nefesh, and also utilizing these very ideas of the strength and the goodness that our Torah brings to us to give us so much ability to withstand this past year. In my Shabbat Hagadol drasha this year, I have two questions. Question number one relates to the text of the Haggadah and the story of Rabbi Yossi HaGalili, Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Akiva, and their discussion about the plagues and Yam Suf. The Haggadah reads, Rabbi Yossi HaGalili Omer, Menayin ata Omer, Shalaku HaMitzrim b'Mitzrayim Eser Makot, V'al Yam Laku 50 Makot. How do you know that the Egyptians received in Mitzrayim 10 Makot, and upon Yam Suf, they received 50 Makot? And so Rabbi Yossi goes on to make a derivation in which he derives from the Psukim, describing the Chartumim, who describe the Etzba Elokim in the Makav Kinim to be a reference only to one part of God's strength. But then later, the Torah describes what happened on the Yam Suf, that upon Yam Suf, the Jewish people saw the hand of God. And so if a finger is 10, then a hand must be 50. The Haggadah goes on to bring the opinions also of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, who multiply further the number of Makot which take place at the Yam Suf. And the question which I have is the most basic of questions. Why is this here? Why do we care? Why does this matter? My second question relates to the religious message within a pandemic and what it is that we are supposed to derive and understand from the experience that we've been all been through this past year. How do a people of faith handle illness? In this regard, I want to quote to you something from this week's news about the National Institute of Health's director, Dr. Francis Collins, a message that he delivered to religious leaders in the United States. He said the following: the vaccines have, in many ways, for many people, been an answer to prayer. They are safe and effective, beyond what we had a right to expect. Unfortunately, many who could most benefit, because they are at highest risk of serious and even life-threatening infections, are still holding back. In this regard, the role of religious leaders to encourage their people to receive the vaccine is critical. And I'd like to add my voice in calling for as many people as possible, that all people should go and get the vaccine as soon as they are allowed to do so in order to stop the spread of this horrible illness. But I'd also like to pose the question, why? Why is it that this is necessary? Why is it that I, as a religious leader, must deliver this message? Why isn't it more obvious that we all go and get the vaccine? And why is it specifically religious people who are often reluctant to follow the best medical advice? In this regard, I'd like to share with you a quote from Rabbeinu Nisim of Gerona, who lived from the year 1320 to the year 1376. And in one of his drashot, in his sermons that are collected in the Drashot Haran, number 10, section 22, he says the following, Vani Omer, and I say, Ki inyanenu hayom karov l'inyan zeh, that what it is that we are going through now, he's writing in the midst of the Black Plague, karov l'inyan zeh, is close to what the Jewish people experienced when they first left Egypt, when they first crossed the Yam Suf, when they first went through the deserts. V'lachein patachti b'parsha zot, and therefore I began explaining and expounding how it was that God conducted God's self with the Jewish people through the deserts. Kedei lahavi'ah el zeh hanismach, in order to bring forward this parallel. V'hu, and it is, sha'avotenu, that our predecessors, lo ra'u et musar Hashem Elokeinu, kemo shira'inu anachnu. They did not see the instruction of God as we see it. Aval bizmanam hayta eretz yoshevet v'shalva, olam kiminhago noheg. At the time of our fathers and grandfathers, of our mothers and grandmothers, the world was basically running by natural processes, where things were, quote, normal. The world was dwelling, was building, was at a basic rest. Va'negev v'ashvela yoshev, and the land was being settled. Im kol zeh haya katnam ava mimasnenu. Nevertheless, our parents, our grandparents, they're greater than we. Their pinkies, as it were, are the size of our thighs. And if among our predecessors there were those who were drawn after the customs and temptations of this world, it's not surprising. However, we, Ra'inu Musar Elokeinu, we have seen the instruction of our God. Ze Yugimel Shana, for this 13 years. Ad Shinistanu Sidrei Bereshit, until the very operations of nature have changed. Ki Yarad Rab Shana Hi, Rov Yoshvei HaOlam, because 13 years ago, when the Black Plague began, there was a terrible evil which befell all those who dwell within this earth. And there took place for them odd, strange sicknesses. That you cannot simply attribute to the regular workings of this world. Aval kol maskil tzarich lahodot v'lomar etzba Elokim hi. Any person of thoughtfulness, any person who is enlightened, must acknowledge that this is the finger of Hashem. As we go through this pandemic, there's a great deal of insights that we too are required to take from this experience. Not necessarily the exact same musar of the Ran, but certainly a greater humility about our place as human beings within this world, and a deeper understanding of why we are here and what we are meant to do. So I'd like to pose to you for this Shabbat Hagadol Hadrasha, how is it that we, as people of faith, should approach this Pesach, the second Pesach that we experience within a pandemic, not simply to ask the question why, but to begin to ask the question, for what purpose? What is it that we are meant to learn from this experience that we've all been through this year? How is it that we, like the Ran, can derive from this plague something of meaning, something that we can take with us going forward to live our lives in this world that much better?